Greetings and various assorted salutations. Welcome to another one of my design notes for course design. I believe this is episode 2. So what we're looking at in today's little episode is more of what worked and what didn't work during the COVID-19 closures. With the end of the school year, I've been able to look at student feedback and update the grades and really process through things. I really feel like I've got a better picture of how things went academically. Now, obviously, I can't talk about the specific results, but I can talk about some general trends and the design premises that I had going into things. First off, one of the things that when I started out, when we got the closures, we had very little notice. There had been rumblings, but of course it hit everyone, quite hard. We were essentially told on Friday the 13th we weren't coming back, or the students weren't, and that we were going to have to convert to online or off-site learning for a bit of time. Right off the bat, I operated under the assumption that we probably weren't going to ever come back. It turns out I was right in that account, but I had to immediately switch courses and move things online, which was a big change up to this point. So when I launched the COVID courses, I knew several things. One, they needed to be simple. The students haven't exactly been trained in online learning, and it's kind of ridiculous to expect them to pick up all the nuances of very complicated tasks. And so I spent a fair amount of time trying to streamline and simplify as much as possible and make things focus on ease of use for the students. Because I had some students that they didn't get internet until a month in. Some students didn't have access to the material for quite some time, and so they were playing catch up. And the ones who were on top of things, they had to transition as well. So there were some issues, as always, with making sure that assignments were easy to turn in, materials were easy to access, etc., etc. So that was one of the big design concerns I had with simplicity. The other thing that I chose to do, and this was a conscious decision that I know other teachers did not go with, but I chose to make my teaching of U.S. History 2 and Ancient Civilizations self-paced. So some teachers had more of a live, where you could have regular meeting sessions and do lectures that way. I did more of an online self-paced course. The reason I did it this way is, my graduate school degree was an online school, and so I was I picked up how to do kind of the self-paced with some deadlines configuration, and so that's kind of what I set things up. And as it turned out, as I went along and in the exit surveys, I had some students that they went from having a part-time job to practically a full-time job, because it turned out if you were in the right industry, like grocery or certain forms of retail, they found themselves working more because their older coworkers were pulling out. Their parents may not have been able to work, and so they became the breadwinners, and they were expected to go to school at the same time. So naturally, even though I wasn't sure that might happen, I knew beforehand that a fair number of students worked. A fair number of them worked in grocery stores and places like that. And so I designed the course to be self-paced under the assumption that, hey, I don't know when students are going to get to things. And that was one of the interesting things I found when I was looking to turn in times for Google assignments. Typically, students almost never turned anything in the mornings. Almost never. Typically, people were turning assignments in, getting things done, anywhere from 1 o'clock in the afternoon to 3 a.m. And so that was kind of a happy circumstance that I predicted correctly on that regard. that students would work when they had time, and the times that they had were not ones that you could normally expect. One of the things that was relatively unsuccessful was office hours. I did virtual office hours through Zoom some, but they weren't really that necessary. I didn't have a huge turnout for them. However, I did have lots of emails. I think part of the reason for that is I think that's my temperament. I really prefer things in writing. And so I preferred to coordinate via email at all possible. Partially because when students would report problems or had concerns, they often had similar issues. And so if I fixed a problem with one student, well, I could copy and paste and repeat with others. The office hours in video format were just not overly effective the way I ran the course, because once the students learned how to operate the systems I'd built up, they pretty much knew exactly what they were in for. Content would change, but the format for assignments, the turn-in format, that did not change. I kind of think of it as like having a standard heading you put on the top of your worksheet. Only difference is it's now all virtual. The other thing I had to have with all this stuff is a great deal of patience. A lot of the COVID closure stuff I was doing involved me waiting for approval to do things from higher-ups, which often the higher-ups I had to deal with had higher and higher-ups to deal with, because we had instructions coming out in all the way up from the state level sometimes on some academic matters. Additionally, I had patience from the opposite direction because, contrary to popular belief, teenagers are not innately good at technology. Just because you see a bunch of them with cell phones doesn't mean they actually know how to do basic computer repair problems. A lot of them, they use computers for some schoolwork, but they aren't like people like me. When I was growing up, I dinked around on computers a lot. And so there's patience with that. And those were kind of the three guiding principles for planning the COVID closure matters. Was creating a self-paced course that had easy to access, ease of use, focusing on that, and having patience in pretty much all directions. And quite frankly, the results were quite satisfactory. I had very high participation from students across all the assignments. Very high. I can't release the exact statistic, but let's just say anyone who argues that you have to be in a schoolhouse to learn and work through material clearly has never seen data like I've seen before. In some cases, I saw greater involvement. I also saw greater engagement with parents being concerned with their students. I imagine having the ability to see them every day and kind of check on their progress really made a difference with some students. Based on my observations, there are some students who will pass this semester that in a more social setting may not have been able to, or would have struggled immensely. Also, looking at my exit surveys, the big trend that I saw was the self-paced coursing was very popular. Surveys indicate that it took a while to get used to a self-paced course, and I will admit it's very, very different. Most students are used to hard fixed deadlines, and they're used to having the 45-minute or block schedule to work on assignments every day in an unrelenting march. Whereas in self-paced, a lot of them admitted that, hey, it takes them getting used to thinking, oh, I could work on this at like 3 a.m., or I have work today, so I'll work on this on Tuesday, or you know what, I'm on a roll, so I might as well just march through a bunch of this stuff. Because kind of the way I release the material is I'd release it a unit at a time, and then after a certain amount of weeks, I would release the next unit. And when we got towards the end, I just released it all at once and said, here's kind of the end deadlines. And students were very receptive to that. In their surveys, they indicated that they really liked that. The surveys also indicated that they liked the ease of turn-in process. I I still have to do some more data collection to figure out what type of assignments work best. Because one of the challenges I have when designing assignments and classroom materials is some students did their work on their cell phones or on tablets or like iPads. And quite frankly, I don't really know how to design assignments for that. I have a bit of a weakness. I'm a PC fan, hardcore. I'll use Linux on occasion. I'm too cheap for Mac. But a lot of students were using portable devices that have different screen limitations, and I'm used to having a big sprawling computer screen, at least 2 monitors and that kind of thing. So there is that challenge moving forward, but I got a lot of useful data out of the student exit surveys that seem to indicate that self-paced design is a popular thing and ease of access is important. So I was right on those 2 counts. What was the other detail? I guess the challenge moving forward is I need to figure out what can I take away from the COVID closures and apply it to in the classroom one-to-one computer learning, 21st century learning, because it's going to be different from what I've been doing this semester. But online learning is quite nice. I am quite fond of it. If I had to say which I preferred, I would say I like online learning a lot. I've had a lot of good experiences with it, though, and I know a lot of people during this time have not. So one of the things I'll have to work on overcoming with a lot of students, especially the new ones I'm getting in the next semester, is a lot of them may have had very bad experiences with computer usage and whatnot. Contrary to popular belief, not everyone is that thrilled about technology when they're young. It's like, I think I had a survey once before all this that many students preferred physical textbooks to e-texts and whatnot. So, I don't know. I'm starting to ramble on a bit, so I think I'll wrap up here. This concludes episode 2, talking about how the COVID classroom worked, COVID closed classroom worked, and hopefully looking at some of the things that I can take away from it moving forward. I guess see you guys next episode, and until later.